Brilliant. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. So once again, welcome to Beyond, a programme of free and funded digital and design support for non-profits working with families during the early years and to support financial wellbeing. I'm really delighted to introduce this talk today with Abby and Harry from digital agency Outlandish. They're going to be talking to you about building confidence and skills to use data to inform your services. So thanks very much both of you for joining us. A few quick reminders from me before we start. So Abby and Harry won't be able to see you, but you can communicate with them and each other using the chat function. Please do introduce yourself, make comments, show agreements and ask questions throughout. And don't forget to send all your chats to all panelists and attendees so that we can all see what you've got to say. We're going to be fielding questions using the Q&A function, and you're very welcome to ask questions as they go along. And we've also got some time set aside at the end as well. And finally, I'm recording this and we'll be making it available on the blog as well, so you can share with colleagues or recap later if there's anything you want to review. And finally, please message me, that's Emily at Join Beyond, directly if you have any technical issues, and I'll try and work that out for you. But that's enough from me. I'll hand over to Abby and Harry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, we can't see you, but we trust that you're there. So we've got a little slide deck for you, so just check that it's all functioning. There we go. So we are Outlandish Cooperative. We're 2 of 8 members that own the co-op, or a worker cooperative. And we have a mission that is Outlandish lives and shares a transformative approach to tech business that brings about positive social change, balanced with the importance of a positive working environment. And we try and do projects that have real impact for the world. We try and make the world a better place through the work that we do. We really care about what we work on, and we work on projects that interest us. And data projects and things to do with data is a big part of a lot of the projects that we do. We genuinely are excited and interested in working on projects around data. But we also don't want to scare people about it. So we're taking quite a human approach to this talk, and it's very much around Harry's experience and story around data and how he came about doing what he does, and the same for me. And so it's very much like an accessible version rather than like high-tech kind of technology stuff. So we'd really like you to ask whatever questions you have. There's no silly questions. So we'll just kind of carry on, and we'd like it to be as interactive as possible. So this is us. Shall I say a little bit about me and then a little bit about you? So we met in the BBC, which you'll find out about from our stories. And we've both worked at Outlandish for 10 years. It's 10-year birthday of Outlandish, a month ago. And I come from a kind of content background and project management. But I also do lots of the kind of finance and business insights as part of the internal workings and making sure that Outlandish itself is successful. So that's kind of my angle.
Yeah, and my day-to-day role is a mixture of different things. I do a lot of kind of product development and sketching out, wireframing how products can go together and make them usable. And I also, at the other end of stuff, do quite a lot of data modeling. So I do lots of work with databases and big data sets. And I got into it really just because it needed to be done. Like, it was never my job to use data, but it always seemed to be needed. And so, I think there's a lot of businesses where there's a lot of things that need to be done, and just trying to pick the low-hanging fruit has kind of led me on this rather long journey into being basically a data specialist.
So our aims today, tell sour stories.
It's an opportunity to slag up all our clients.
Tell our stories so that we frame what we think data actually is. And really a key thing for us is to deconstruct the fear around data and around using it, and that actually like anyone can have a go, and you just come in at the level that you are at and see where you go. Help you to understand what you could do instead of being scared of what you might not be able to. Answer questions, so please do ask them, and really encourage you to get stuck in and have a go. So we're going to start with Harry's story. Do you want me to do the clicking?
Yeah, I can do the clicking.
All right.
Clicker here. Yeah, so my story starts before I actually started working in digital. So I used to work in telly, and I worked on this program called The Big Questions, where I would work a 70-hour week so that Nicky Campbell could stand in front of the nation and ask important questions, such as, is the Pope right to condemn capitalism? We also did, does God care what you wear? Which was not worth spending 70 hours preparing. And it was a very fun thing to work on, but it also had a kind of lots of downsides. The industry is not a very nice industry to work in, and it's quite backwards and slow. I had to spend a lot of time arguing that we shouldn't ask the question, why do we all hate Muslims, on a BBC One show. And after I left the show, they did the question, should you try to cure gays? So there were lots of downsides, and I wanted to work in an industry where things were a bit less fixed and you could do new things. Oh, that's got, sorry. Thank you. But I learned some really good attitudes from television. So this woman here is called Elizabeth Clough. She was the executive producer of The Big Questions. And, like a lot of senior people, she made a kind of good pretense at not being able to work the photocopier. But the brilliant thing about television is that the senior people can actually do stuff. That, if you needed her to write a script, she could write a script. If you needed her to hold the camera, she could hold the camera. If you needed her to edit something together, she could edit something together. And I think that attitude is just like, you just got to do it. Someone says to you, write the script for the next show, do it, is something that's still been really good stead in my next job. So being a bit fed up with the politics, basically, of TV, I moved to BBC Learning, which is a digital team dedicated to using the BBC's content to promote learning, both in children, teachers, and adults. And it's a fantastic place where I learned all sorts of different skills, and I was working in a team where we came up with ideas, which was fantastic. And this is one of the first ideas I came up with. It was a browser plugin, so that dates the idea. And I suppose you can see that it's running in an old version of Windows, so it's a long time ago, it's 15 years ago or so. But I had this brilliant idea, and I worked out how it would work, and I was like, right, and everyone loved it, and the teachers all thought it was exactly what they needed. It was a way of providing contextual access to the BBC's range of content from any web page. And it went down really well in user testing. I was like, oh, great, well, who's going to build it? And the answer was code monkeys. I think you know this idea. The idea amongst all the kind of creatives in BBC's learning department was that somewhere in the BBC there were these code monkeys that would take your wonderful creative idea, darling, and turn it into some code. Exactly how that worked, people took pride in not knowing. So people, you'd say, oh, right, and how will that be? Well, oh, I don't know that, darling. I used to work in television. And basically, the BBC's digital department was quite largely populated with people who hadn't succeeded very much in television and were now being quietly shunted off into digital. And the sad thing about this kind of attitude is that if the very senior people say, well, I can't do that, darling, no, that's beneath me, then that filters down, and before you know it, like everybody's saying that, oh, of course they can't do any coding or do any of making anything. And the result was that nothing got made. So we sat around for a very long time, and a lot of ideas were had, there was a lot of clapping everyone on the back to say what a fantastic idea it was, but it didn't actually get built and it didn't actually get launched. And I went downstairs one day to find these code monkeys and found 20 empty desks, which were supposedly populated with code monkeys but weren't, and that is why nothing was getting made. So I decided to build some stuff myself. It wasn't beautiful and it certainly wasn't technically excellent, but it got us to the next stage each time. So this was one of my very early projects. It was a search engine that could surface for teachers different bits of content that might be useful from different places. So one of the feedback that we had was that teachers needed some news content, some bite-sized content, some video clips, and some stuff that was specifically for teachers. And when they couldn't find all the different stuff in the BBC. So I made this, I designed it, and then I basically made an Excel sheet with an incredibly complicated macro that would publish a search engine. And at the time, I didn't know anything about programming. My job wasn't a technical job. I'd never made a website before, but I really wanted to test this concept and see whether teachers wanted it. So I could use Excel and I could write a macro, and I made this complicated macro that produced this thing, which is the Learning Resource Finder, which went on to become a key way of accessing content for BBC Learning. After a few years of that, it was quite enjoyable, but a little bit frustrating that not that much got that's still, you know, even though I was prototyping stuff, it's still quite slow to get anything actually made. And so Abby and I and a few other people decided to set up this company Outlandish, which is basically about like getting stuff done. And you know, it's been a very fun journey. We've worked with all sorts of organizations, and one of the things that we've realized is that, you know, a lot of people think, oh, we're not doing it well enough, but, you know, having worked with some of these, you know, big international blue chip companies, nobody's really doing it well enough. And if you're trying, then that is probably means you're doing better than most. We worked with a broadcaster that wanted to find out what they had broadcast. They didn't have a list of it. We worked with a publisher, one of the biggest websites in the world, that wanted to find out what was on their website. We worked with a multi-billion-dollar multinational organization that wanted to find out which social media accounts it actually controlled and what it was doing with them. We worked with COVID scientists who are trying to find out where all the samples are. And probably the highlight of people not knowing the data that they probably should know was working with a bank that wanted us to try and work out how much money should be in all the bank accounts. They knew there was some money in them. They had a fairly good idea, but they didn't actually know the answer to what that amount of money should be. How am I doing, Sean?
Halfway-ish.
Cool. One of the things that I would really try to encourage you to avoid is saying that you don't like the font. Like most of the clients we work with are absolutely wonderful, particularly the people we work with directly. But quite often there is like a very senior person in the background somewhere that's too busy to talk to us or really like engage with finding out how their website should work or what content they should put on it. And they certainly don't have any like technical background in understanding their data or anything. And so they resort to doing things which seem very easy to them. Commenting on the design is the most common one. So this is a quote from, I think it was Greg Dyke, but it was the BBC Director General when the website was first made. So the BBC was one of the early adopters of the websites, and the team who had made this website went to the Director General and they said, Director General, you know, first there was radio, then there was TV, and we're very proud to say that we've now made this website, which is a new form of broadcast. And the Director General obviously didn't know what to say about this, so he said he didn't like the font, which at the time was fairly useless because there was no way of changing the font on the website. Other comments that we've had people who don't like rectangles because they're too boxy. This is a huge problem on the web because screens are rectangular and the web is basically designed to make things in rectangles. And if your only piece of input is that you don't want things to be square, or that you have this particular type of diagram that you think looks great and you don't know anything about it, but you think it looks fantastic and exciting, it really can derail a project, and what could otherwise be a very successful project suddenly becomes not very good. This is probably the best piece of feedback that we have received. It was actually not for us, but we witnessed it. It's quite long, so I might come back to it at the end if we have time. But basically, these are all like, you know, cautionary tales of, you know, if you don't start commenting on the design just because you don't understand the data, you probably don't understand the design any better than you actually understand the data. Spend a bit of time to actually really try and work out what you're doing. I'm working on 2 projects at the moment. This is one of them. So this is a fairly big data project. It's for a big health organization. We're trying to genetically monitor COVID and try and find out how to cure it and make sure it's not mutating in a weird way. And these on the left are all the different technologies that we're using to analyze the project. And this on the right is one of the diagrams that I've made, which is a 2-dimensional Sankey diagram, which is showing us how all the samples are flowing around the various processes they're supposed to go through. This is not the kind of diagram that we would ever show an end user, but it is useful to me to actually understand what's going on. But I think that very few organizations are at this point. You know, these people have got exabytes of data that they're trying to analyze, and they've got hundreds of analysts trying to do the analysis. You're much more likely to be at this kind of level. So this is the other project I'm working on. It's called Read for Good, and it's about encouraging children to read more. There's lots of studies that show that reading more can really help in, not just in terms of literacy, but help in terms of people's general well-being and, you know, access to jobs and all that kind of stuff. The thing that probably sets this project apart, and is the thing that made us take on the project, even though it was quite a small project and didn't really have enough budget to do what they wanted to do, was that the CEO of their organization has taken like a personal responsibility for understanding what's going on and making something. So Justine is not like super technical, but she tries and she understands that it can be understood. What they want to do is make a way for teachers to be able to track their classes' readathon. So they have a readathon, they say the school wants to try and read whatever it is, 10,000 minutes over the next 3 months. And then each child can go in and sort of read it and log how much they read. So they say what they read, how long they read it for, etc. And there's lots of, they've collected lots of evidence that shows that by doing this capturing of the data, it actually really encourages people to read more. But when they came to us, they didn't say, we're going to change the landscape of reading or we want to reinvent the website. They came to us and said, look, we've made this Google Sheet, which you can see here, where the teacher can just basically go to Google, make a copy of the Google Sheet, and then it gives them this Google form at the bottom that you can see just at the bottom there. And the students enter a couple of fields of data, and then the teacher ends up with a list of, all the students, what they read, how much they've read. And it just worked quite well. It was simple for them to do. Like Justine made it herself, and she worked out all the kind of all the edge cases, and she worked out how to improve it, and she's done some testing. She's talked to people about it. She really understands what the problems are. And whereas if someone came to us with a very high level idea, we would probably say, oh, you don't have enough money to do it. And especially if they said, yes, this is going to transform the world of reading, we would definitely say they didn't have enough money to do it. Instead, we could, say, well, this can just about be done for the money. And you seem to understand that, that doesn't mean you'll get everything in the world. And it isn't about changing everything from orange to blue and back again. It's about trying to make something that's just good enough for now, and that will move the adventure forwards. And this is the sort of thing that I would really, really, really recommend everybody does. It's not difficult to do if you can use email, if you can use Facebook. You can do this, and I think even if it takes you a while to do it, even if it takes you a couple of days to do it, what you will have learned and what you will have delivered to your organization is not just the specific, Google Sheet or survey that you've done. It's the kind of the attitude. It will tell people in your organization, you've got to try, you can do it. It's okay for it to take a little while for you to understand what you're doing. But, don't just comment on the font and stick to the bits that are easy. Put yourself outside your comfort zone, spend a little bit of time fiddling around with things, because if you can understand your bit of the problem, it makes it a lot easier for you to explain, the bigger problem to us. And it also makes it a lot easier for us to immediately say, well, this is, these are issues and these are not issues. So yeah, I think that this is a good starting point. Everybody should try to be like Justine. It's a really nice project. If you know a school that wants to organise a readathon, you should. So we are now building a new app-based version of this, basically, which looks nicer and has got much better feedback from the students. But as I say, it was just very easy for us to iterate and do the complicated technical stuff with somebody else having discovered the bits that they could discover first. So yeah, that's my message. One day you might get to this. Some of your organisations might already be at this kind of state. But don't worry if you're not. I think a lot of the time when you kind of hear about data, when you read about data, somebody's doing something very, very complicated and it all sounds terribly clever. Probably if you've got this many technologies, it will go wrong somehow. So, try to start simple. And Abby's going to talk now a bit about how she uses data. Oh, sorry. One final thing was, these are two of the most impactful projects that we run, school cuts and NHS cuts. Both of them had very big impacts in the respective elections in the 2017 and 2020 elections. 2019, not big enough, obviously, but they had an impact. The point I wanted to make about these is just that what you're trying to come up with is something very simple, especially when you're giving it to students. We did a lot of different user testing on this. Sorry, when you're giving it to your end users. We did a lot of user testing on this, and we had all sorts of very complicated things. It turned out what everyone wants to know is how much money is their child going to lose. And we did a lot of data analysis to be able to provide these, these two headline figures. But but you don't want to be showing people the analysis, and just because you've got it doesn't mean you should show it off. This is an example of like what not to do. On the left, that is a government PowerPoint presentation to help you understand whether it's okay to go out or which tier you'll be in or something. It wasn't helped by the fact that the presentation's format meant that all of the numbers went off the screen. But even without that, pretty much nobody can understand that graph. The chart on the right is a radar chart. Lots of our clients come to us really wanting radar charts. We, if necessary, organize a user testing, which demonstrates that nobody knows how to read a radar chart. So, as you'll see in some of Abby's slides, what we tend to do is something that's quite simple. And, we are data experts and we're doing simple stuff for ourselves. And there's a reason for that. And it's not because we don't know how to do the data. It's because if it's simple, it will maybe work. Over to you, Abby.
Thank you, Harry. So my story is pretty different. Well, complementary, but different. So I very much come from a kind of a user of data perspective rather than a creator and sort of coder. And I'm a pragmatist. I like to look at what can I get at now quite easily and quite readily, instead of a complex journey of gathering lots of data. It's like what's out there now. From Outlandish's perspective, I do lots of project work and I work with clients and I work externally with people, but also I have a really key role in the internal kind of insights of how well the business is doing. We all own, I'm one of the owners, there's 8 of us that do, and so it's really important that we are able to understand how successful our business is being, whether that's impact on the world or our bank balance or whatever it might be. So I use a lot of off-the-shelf tools to keep an eye on the sort of the health of our business. So I'm going to talk to you about those in a bit. I always ask myself, what am I trying to find out before just trying to get some data about any subject. So what would be most useful to know about this project, to know if it's working or not? And spending a little bit of time just kind of working that out really helps. And in terms of my role on projects and working on data projects, it's very much around, okay, we might have this big data set or a complex one or a messy one. How can I make the story shine through for the users? So keep the story actually as simple as possible. So my journey in like digital started with BBC Learning too. But that's kind of that's only where it's exactly the same, isn't it, Harry? And I came on, as I said, like as a content producer. So I did lots of work with various kind of age groups, creating engaging content in lots of different ways, which you guys went on in my screen and not here. There we go. So BBC Blast was a teen user-generated content site. BBC Jam was like called the national curriculum. It was the digital curriculum. It was going to be a free resource to cover all of the national curriculum about, a long time ago now. And most people know BBC Bite Size as it is now, which covers all of the curriculum. But I basically needed to ensure that the content we were creating actually made a difference, actually taught people things or engaged them, has a positive effect. And I think that's quite often quite different from other roles that might be around, in digital, numbers sold or like viewing figures in itself was a success. For us, it was deeper than that. It was much more around what impact did you actually have for these people coming in and engaging with your content. So these are the kind of questions that I would want to find the answer to. So how many people are engaging? So things like analytics, we had some basic stuff in the BBC around like actually people kind of visiting the site, but how could I get hold of that? I want that in like a spreadsheet so I can have a look at it and understand what's going on. And then the more qualitative stuff, like are they learning anything? Kind of have to ask them. And that's also data for me, is like data gathering around how users actually engage in what they get from it, where they're getting stuck. So again, Google Analytics of your website content around where people are leaving your site, stuff like that. So this is the useful stuff to know if your thing is working or not. And really, as I've said, it's very much around our key performance indicators for quality and engagement rather than just facts and figures. So numbers in themselves don't matter to me. It's like, yeah, so what if you've got 10,000 people? Why have you got 10,000? Did you want 10,000? What did you want those 10,000 people to do? So just looking at some data and kind of getting a figure isn't good enough for me. It's about finding what the story is and like the evidence around it. And that's not technical knowledge, that's user knowledge, that's kind of thinking about how to be successful in what you're trying to do. Moving on from my extending experience understanding users, I moved to the World Service and did, I was social media manager, like back when people didn't really know what to do with Facebook and Twitter. So I started to create a strategy for World Service around how to use social media, again, for the purpose of engagement and driving the stories and getting more viewers and engagement with the stories that they were running. So that's when I started to use tools, free tools that were available to us, like Facebook Insights. And this is where I started to really get to grips with what tools are out there for free, because there wasn't any budget to be able to pay for like swizzly tools, and there weren't many out there then anyway. So this is where I started to become a kind of data, I don't know what to call it, like an editor. So like, okay, so out of all those figures, this is like just a random screen grab from the internet, because I didn't have many screen grabs of Facebook Insights. It doesn't look like that now. But which ones of these are actually useful to me? I don't care about like the vast majority of those. So I would start to look at, okay, that page views over a period of time is useful. I want that to be going up. I want followers to be going up or whatever. It's quite basic kind of stats, but what things are useful to me? So some people are kind of a little bit baffled by, oh, there's so many numbers, I don't understand all of them. I don't actually care about understanding lots of these things. It's the ones that are useful to me, and just hone in on that and understand those, and don't worry too much about all of the noise around it. Oh, I keep doing it, I keep going on the wrong laptop. Google Analytics, most people have Google Analytics and don't really know what to do with it. And I guess it's just the same question. It's like, what is useful for you to know about your digital users on your website? How do you know if they're doing what is useful to you? And this is a live example of our most visited pages on our website. And as you can see, the vast majority are technical blogs. Now, I don't write technical blogs very much, but they have, I think our most successful one, that XML to JSON one, is that 10 years old, 8 years old?
It's really old, yeah.
And it still gets tons and tons of views. So that's great, that's good to know, but how is it useful to us? So I, as a producer, think, okay, someone's coming in, they're probably a developer. The likelihood, obviously our website is there as a sort of sales window, shop window of what we do. So the likelihood is, or the most likely journey that might be useful to us is that they might want to come work for us. So I would then optimize the links on the blog to be about what recruitment we have, or further tech blogs that are useful to them, maybe a little bit about how we work, and just start to kind of seed that idea of who Outlandish are from the user that I think that they're going to be coming into it. Again, that's not data, like hardcore data, looking at a spreadsheet and doing lots of calculations and macros and all that kind of stuff. I don't touch any of that. I just look at what data I have and work out what to then act on it to have more impact. And it's as simple as that. I've used a couple of views of Google Analytics around particular things that I'm watching at the moment, and then I can optimize the content around what I want, what I think people will engage with and want to do.
It's also just worth pointing out that the raw number of how many page views we had is not very useful. The XML to JSON thing is useful for people who are doing that particular technical task, but they're probably not in a place where we could hire them, and they probably don't want to work for us. Whereas hire a technology co-op for your next project is obviously completely different to us and much more valuable.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is it's about testing it. So you can make as many assumptions as you like about what might or might not happen. Try it, and the data will help you to see if it works or not. But it won't necessarily tell you yes or no completely. It just gives you flavour and more information about what might or might not work in different situations. I should have put Outlandish a slide before, but I joined Outlandish from BBC Learning. You see the pattern going on here. And this is why I'm going to talk about the internal tools. And again, it's like we haven't done that much internally to create bespoke stuff or like complicated data solutions to understanding our margins or any of that kind of stuff. We use the tools that many small businesses use. So some of the, and also, as I said, I work on projects and I'm still just finding interesting stories. So this is a social media monitor for British Council. It's got something like 350 social media channels they have around the globe. This map is actually not that useful, but it's something that the board kind of wanted as sort of like a lovely visual thing to show what they invested in. If you actually dig down beneath this, there's loads and loads of charts around their KPIs, which were around reach, like raw numbers, engagement, like how often they were getting replies and sort of conversations, and quality, like how many kind of likes and shares and things like that. So they had a whole range of KPIs, and we created a tool around it. It's really about, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of ways that you could look at social media metrics, and it was about picking out the key things that meant something to the team managing those platforms. But the most of my data work often is internal. Toggle we use for time tracking, and actually Harry doesn't like Toggle very much, but mainly because he doesn't like the toggling of his time rather than the reporting of it, because you don't really do that much at the actual reporting from Toggle, right? I do the finances and kind of check budgets and things like that, kind of program management, operational sort of point of view. It's incredibly powerful reporting tool, and if you just play around with it, you can save reports, as you can see from that. But basically, I can get an overview of all the hours worked on every project that Outlandish has done, and I can get cuts of that. And yeah, that sounds great. But the use of that is to know which projects are overrunning, which projects have come in early, which ones are coming in late, which do we need to sell hosting for again because the contract's running out. It kind of gives me loads and loads of insights that save the business money, that help us improve our processes so that we can see what kind of projects are going well or not. And I use this tool just as a user. There's no special thing that we've built on it or anything. It's just literally getting bar charts of time and then filtering out projects. Super straightforward to use. And again, it's only certain parts of it that I already know are really useful. What time are we on? I'll stop soon, I promise. We use Xero as our accounting, and exactly the same. They've got loads of saved reports in there. I can create my own. You can get loads of Google videos that will just tell you how to do things, like help sheets. Like I'm not particularly technical, but I am confident that I can work out how to use a tool just by asking the help screens and the YouTube videos that help you out. And this is the bit where Outlandish does have a strength. We've got our own developers, and so we have created a really quite simple finance dashboard. We work in circles, so we have a team that is responsible for the finances of Outlandish, and this is just kind of monitoring our sales, cost of sales, our gross margin, our net margin. Super simple. Click the dates you want, click the filters you want, and it pulls it all together from Xero, from Toggle. I think that's all. Is it just Xero, Toggle? Possibly.
Co-pitch.
But a couple of tools, it just kind of uses an API to bring in the data. And that's one benefit that we have. We have developers that can ask us what we want, and then in a few days, chuck up something that looks pretty decent. And notice there's no like crazy charts going on in there. It's very much a line chart. That's all we need. We just need to know that our business is healthy. You don't need like snazzy infographic kind of animations or anything like that. It's just like, and then as I said in that slide, iteration's the key. Get something up, see how it works, see how you can improve it, keep going. Like we're not finished with this. There's lots we could add, but we'll take we'll do it step by step and work out what's most useful. This is just some examples of some data projects that we've worked on. This is Children's Commissioner's Office around data around vulnerability. And they gave us like quite a messy lot of data, wasn't it? Like with loads of different sources. They didn't quite know what to do with it that was best. So we created this kind of tile approach of just simple, quite large figures that they could then that journalists or policymakers could actually save off from using reports or stories and all that kind of stuff. So it's like first step, how do we make something that's useful for the end users? And we could have done like huge kind of comparison charts across different groups and like lots of complexity, which I think was where they kind of wanted to go. So lots of sort of complex filtering and changing the axes and all this kind of stuff. Actually, we didn't think that was the most useful thing for them to do to start with. It's about getting the data out there in a way that's shareable, that's interesting, that's engaging. So we kind of boiled it down to these kind of cards that would tell a story on its own. And then you can go into those cards and kind of drill down a little bit more. But again, simplicity is the key, and what's useful for the users rather than what you think the users want or what you want to show them. And again, super simple bar chart. So this is audience finder, box office data. They've got, like, I don't know, massive amounts of data around arts organisations, ticket sales. And it was just thinking, okay, so what's useful? So you're a really busy arts marketer and you just want to know how you're doing against a sort of benchmark. So in this example, it's your box office data in the kind of darkish greeny teal. And it's London performing arts data as a sort of benchmark. And users found this really, really useful because they could actually see where they differed and they might then think about why, might be a good reason. And then also if you were way off, like what could you do to change it? So it kind of just highlighted key parts of their data that they could act on to make a difference. And that's really what it comes down to for me, is like you can spend years looking at a data set and finding incredibly complex sort of stories around it, but how quickly can we get something that's useful for people to really act on? And I think Harry already mentioned this, but user data and actually just spinning up a form and asking your users what they want and how they find it can be incredibly useful. This was a few questions off the back of a workshop that we ran to help one of our clients start to use consent-based decision-making, which is what we use for our decision-making approach. And this is a Google form, so we created it in like 10 minutes. Got the team to sort of fill it in, and then you get some nice pie charts. You shouldn't ever have more than 3, right, in a pie chart. Is that correct?
I think 2 is a good number.
This is good. So this is just an answer of one of the questions, and it's a clear indicator that the move we made to decide to use a different decision-making approach has had a significantly positive impact on the team. And that took, you know, a couple of hours of our time to kind of get together that actually gives real evidence. And again, it's anyone can sign up, anyone with word processing skills and ability to use email can just get going with it. I think that's my last one. So how does this help you? I hope what you've heard is that you should start where you are, wherever that may be. You may be more advanced, you may be less advanced. You should use what you have. So have a think about what data do you have access to? What tools does your company already use? Could you use them more? And do what you can. So give it a go and see what happens. Test it, iterate, try again. Get a bit better next time. Do you want to say about this?
Yeah, so this is just a bit of a plug for one of our clients. Sean falls into another one of the data hero category of someone who's, you know, willing to give it a go and answer some of the questions first. This is a tool called the Data Maturity Assessment. If you Google Data Orchard Data Maturity Assessment, you'll find it. It's very simple. It basically asks you a series of questions about your use of data in different contexts. So how you use the data, how you collect the data, how you store the data, how you analyze the data. And what it will do is give you a score in each of the different categories of data. It's very, very unlikely that you are mastering the data in every category. Probably even if you're Google, you might find that you're like, there's one area where you could be doing better. And I think that the point here is just to make it, the point that I'm trying to make is that it isn't a monolithic journey. You're not either good with data or not good with data. There are areas where you are better and areas where you're not as good, but everybody is on that journey somewhere. And it's okay to be at the beginning of the journey. I think the key thing is just to remember that you've got to just take small steps. Taking some, you know, giant leap is very likely to fail. And, you know, enormous technology companies fail all the time, and startups raise 100 million quid and then fail. Unless you've got 100 million quid that you don't mind wasting, probably just start small.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add was there's a difference between your organisational kind of where you are as an organisation and actually the difference within people. So there will be some people like Harry, who wants to dive in and learn something and work it out themselves. And there's people like me who are confident in using the tools that are there. And there's other people who are less confident. And it's about finding the people within the organisation that have like interest and energy and motivation in trying something and giving it a go. So I think that's it. Is it? Questions? Now I've seen a couple, so let's go. Can you give us a bit of an idea of what big data is and how it compares about the more tangible things you've talked about?
Yeah, I think this is a quite common question. I mean, I would say that very few organizations have big data. I mean, that graph that I showed earlier, they have got a lot of data, but it isn't what you would normally consider big data. Big data is really about things like telephone records. So if you're TalkTalk or something, you've got like 1 billion different phone call records, and you can probably do something with it. We quite often have clients say they've got big data, and it turns out they've got like 316 rows of data. Big data, yeah, is basically about having very, very, very large amounts of not very structured data and trying to analyze it. It's got a load of specific challenges, but as I say, you're quite unlikely to be in that scenario unless you are a phone company or something similar. I think that broadly, if you've got like gigabytes of data that you're trying to analyze, you're starting to get towards big data. But normally it's talking about thousands of gigabytes of data, and it's quite unlikely that as a small charity you have ended up with that. If you have, ask another question, I can follow up a bit more.
How do we do this? Are we supposed to click on answer live?
Oh, I don't know. But maybe they can answer.
We'll just keep going unless Emily tells us we're doing it wrong. We're a small and very new org.
Great job.
Okay, brilliant. We've not been using much data up until now. If we're going to try and learn a new tech, what should it be? I mean, for us, it would be Google Sheets and Google Forms. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Google Forms is a really, really useful tool. It's very, very quick, and if you can, do something on Facebook, then you can make Google Forms. We use it all the time. We use it for internal surveys. We use it for client surveys. We use it for like quickly hacking together a bit of the app that the client hasn't got enough budget for, but kind of needs. It's just very simple to get started with and very, very flexible. And it's something that you're quite familiar with. You've seen an Excel spreadsheet before. And if you've seen an Excel spreadsheet, you can work out how to use Google Forms and Google Sheets. One thing I would say is just make sure that you test whatever you're doing with it first. Quite often clients come to us with like what they're planning to send out as a survey, and it's very difficult to do any quantitative analysis with it. So I would say that generally mixing, if you are doing something like a survey, mixing some qualitative stuff about like what was your favorite thing with some quantitative things like how would you rate the appearance from 1 to 5 is really helpful. It makes the analysis just a lot quicker and easier and a bit more evidence-based. What are some of the common data problems you see in the charity sector?
I think it's not a data problem, but a confidence problem. So, we can't do. We wouldn't know how to do that, or we couldn't possibly. We need, and just come with very few answers to your own questions. When actually, when we start working, you do know the answers and you are able to do it. And it's kind of having that confidence that data isn't like a scary thing. It's not this amorphous alien that's going to like injure you. It's actually a huge opportunity. In fact, small opportunity, lots of small opportunities. So it's kind of undoing that fear. And I think Harry talked about Read for Good. And there was another example, DePaul, which is a homelessness charity. They had a really small budget. And we were like, okay, let's meet the woman because she seems really nice. She came in, she'd drawn wireframes, like step-by-step wireframes of everything that she wanted. And we were like, yes, we can do that for the budget because you've basically done so much of the thinking.
And we can say that bit won't work and you should present this bit like that. And, we've done this thing 100 times before. We're pretty sure it should be like this instead. So, we will, I think almost any agency or anyone you work with will say, what they think would be a good way of doing it. But it's a lot easier to do that than from starting with a blank slate or some very very high level mission. I would say that not having a clear idea of your goals is very important. At the beginning of every project, we run something called a theory of change. A lot of you might be familiar with that, but it's basically about identifying what is the change that we're trying to create in the world, and working back from there. So I think that people will quite often say, we've got all this data, we want to do something with it. And that is probably going to go wrong. You will probably end up drawing some very complicated graphs that nobody wants or can understand. Whereas if what you're saying is, we know that teachers need to find out what is on the BBC's website, how can we do that? It's a much easier challenge to work with. So I think that, starting by getting everyone on the same page, the developers, the designers, whoever your closest person to a data person is, whoever's closest to the users, getting those people to sit in a room or a Zoom and a Jamboard and say what they think they're trying to achieve, and then each put in their kind of ideas about how to do that. I think it's really important.
Another common problem is coming with an idea that requires data that doesn't actually exist yet, with the assumption that it can be magicked up from somewhere, or that it doesn't take long to gather. And actually, so you want to do like a data project or the next school cuts, I think people have come to ask us for. It's like, okay, so what data have you got? Oh, we don't have any data yet. Oh, we don't know. And that's problematic, I would say. If you don't have the data to back up the simple story or the campaign that you want, then that can be a non-starter.
Yeah. I think that slightly controversially, I would say that when you approach things, when you use a design thinking approach, data can sometimes get neglected in that, because I think it can be quite hard, and it isn't necessarily easy for everyone to quickly engage with it. Like everyone can have a quick go at sketching something. So we do lots of design sprints, which is basically getting some domain experts and subject experts, some data people and whoever's relevant to the project, getting all in a room together and working out what would the solution to this problem look like. And we do lots of sketching and we use lots of post-its, and it is a traditional design thinking, co-design process. But we also make sure that we are asking those questions about the data, like does the data exist? How could it get created? What would version 1 look like before we've got all this amazing insight data that we'll have in version 3? And I think that just being really honest and quite tough with yourself early on is really important. Also, if you're going to make something very complicated with data, it's probably going to be very expensive. Like the data things that you see out there in the world have cost millions or tens or hundreds of millions of pounds to build. So the thing that you are going to build is almost certainly going to be much simpler unless you have somehow got hold of a very, very large budget. But they not only cost a lot to build, they cost a lot to maintain. You might easily be looking at spending £100,000 to build something and then £10,000 a year to maintain it. Do you want to do that? And do you know that what you're trying to achieve is worth that? If not, try and start smaller. Worst data experience?
Other than people coming with a data idea but not having the data, which is kind of a bad experience, I would say kind of over-engineering the solution when you don't have enough in the data set. So what I'm talking about is having a very complex filtering system, say for a search, that ends up for the user that there's only ever 1 or 2 results as you sort of filter through.
Yeah, so, or no one searches.
Yeah. So sort of over-engineering the solution without trying with what you've got first. It's kind of an assumption that it must be complicated and really detailed, when often users just want 1 or 2 clicks and that's it.
Yeah, I would say starting without specifications, without any specifications at all, is very, very high risk. We have several times sort of said to a client that, this is how the process would work. And they're like, great, we've promised it to someone by next Thursday. And then you're trying to build something without any clear requirements. That's quite difficult. The data takes a lot longer to get hold of, I think is a fairly universal truth in this area. The BBC once told us they'd have us the data next Thursday, and they got it to us 18 months later. So, just be aware that it might not be where you thought it was or in the format that you need it to be. What? Changing attitudes?
Yeah. It's very difficult to change people's attitudes.
I think it's difficult to change your own attitudes, let alone somebody else's.
I suppose suppose it's what I was saying around undoing that kind of fear, or sort of putting it all in a black box as a big thing that you couldn't possibly understand, or I understand everything about it. Like, there's two kind of positions. So data is not a homogeneous thing. It's all around us in many forms, and there's not a doing data and a not doing data. It's just doing your job to the best of your ability. So sort of breaking down that kind of
I think seeing it as part of your job.
Yeah.
Like, I would say that there's a generation of people who've just retired, who, like, senior people who've just retired, for whom it was a bit of a, they didn't have to use email. They were like, oh, I've got a PA, they will sort out my email. I can't make a calendar invite and I can't use Zoom. And it's a bit like, saying at the beginning, like, Elizabeth Clough could actually do that, but she kind of pretended she couldn't. And I think that everyone now who's still working gets that they kind of need to be able to send an email, and they need to be able to use a calendar invite. And I think it's about, like, recognizing that that is true of the next level of complexity too. You can make a survey, you can think about what questions need to be in it, you can draw a picture of how you imagine the website will work, you can make a list of the 5 most important users that will use it and like it, and you can make a list of the 100 pieces of content that you are most important to surface, or the 3 biggest insights that you really, really would like to understand. You can do that, and you have to do that. Like, if you hire us to do it, we'll ask you, what are the 3 most important things that you want to get out of this? We can't do it for you. It's like hiring an architect and expecting them to not ask you, like, how big you want it, or what color you want it, or how many rooms you want. They will have to ask those questions, or you won't get the thing that you want. What should come first, the data or the story? I'm wondering if it's easier to collect new data or trawl through existing stuff that was not made or gathered with that intention.
I mean, first it's what's your aim? What are you trying to do? And then what have you got at the moment to be able to answer that? The question first is, what do you want to achieve?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty pointless to look at large quantities of data, unless you're used to, like, reading telephone directories and you've really missed that experience. I trawl through very large quantities of data quite often, but always with some sort of purpose in mind. It's very likely that if you have come up with a new thing that you want to achieve, that the data you've got isn't perfect for achieving it, and that you might have to collect some more data. I would say that quite often you will end up combining some new data with your existing data. So you might have a lot of data about who's used your website, but not much data about how they used it. You might know a lot about how many people used it, but not really about what they did. And so you might end up combining your 5 years of Google Analytics data with 1 month of Hotjar data. Hotjar is a tool that allows you to record your users as they come to your site and browse around it. And so you might end up with a fairly small amount of this much more rich qualitative data, and quite a large amount of not very rich data. And you can use the qualitative data to sort of tell you what the insight is from the large quantity of data. That is a very common thing. But yeah, I would really, really, really recommend, and I know Abby would too, to start with saying, okay, who are you trying to reach, and what are you trying to make better about their lives? And that might be you're trying to reach your middle managers and help them understand more about the people they're trying to help. You might work for a housing association. You're trying to help the managers understand that their tenants are not as happy as they could be because it's taken them 6 weeks to get a repair because you keep sending a carpenter to replace a window or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and the 2 examples that are kind of different. As school cuts, there was a data set or a calculation, the fair funding formula, that NUT, now NEU, wanted to see what the impact was per school, right? So there was like a use case for a data set that they had with the assumption that it was unfair, and they wanted to kind of check that it was unfair and then make that public.
And it turned out to be very different from what they thought it was. They thought it was that the countryside would gain money and that the cities would lose money. In fact, it was everyone would lose money apart from about 4 places.
So you have a kind of hypothesis of what you think you're going to, what you think the truth is, or what you think the data will show, and then you create something to show that. And often other stories and differences will come up. The other side of it is like DePaul had a program and they wanted to understand how it was working over time. So they wanted to create and gather data so that they knew that the outcomes they were making actually were having, or outcomes they were setting did have an impact. So in that case, there was no data set, they needed to create one. And so the work was to create an app that allowed clients to be able to input that data. So they were creating data because the aim was to understand if it was success. So it comes back to what you're trying to do.
I would say that we very commonly augment a private data set, as in one that the client has created or has got hold of somehow, with open data, so with publicly available data, which is often published by the government, but also by lots of other people. I'd also recommend publishing your data or considering it. It's I think a lot of people are like, maybe we'll make £1 billion out of this data. If it's not obvious to you how you'll make £1 billion out of it, you almost certainly won't make £1 billion out of it. So it's often a good idea just to put it out there, and you might find that somebody else builds the thing that you needed using the data that you gave them.
Right then.
I think that's time. We're happy to answer more questions if there are more questions, or you can contact us at the details there.
Thanks so much, both Abby and Harry. This has been a really thought-provoking afternoon talk. I personally enjoyed hearing your unique journeys and perspectives, and I also think there's some really sound and practical advice for our participants to take forward. So thank you very much. And I also want to thank our audience members for joining in and for your questions. I've got a couple of things I just want to flag. We're almost at the end of the Beyond programme for the year, and our final session is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Hosted by Rooted by Design. They're going to be running an interactive workshop session looking at how organisations can more effectively design with communities in order to achieve more equitable outcomes. So there are a couple of places left for that, and you can see that on our website. I'll also be sharing this recording along with on our blog, so you can share it forward as well. So thank you again, both Abby and Harry, and I hope you all have a lovely afternoon.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.